Okay, so oops, almost forgot the lights. Hi. Okay, so welcome to the voices you have read. I just realized my microphone isn't hooked up, so hopefully the sound quality is not going to be terrible because I don't really want to. Well, there's no way of changing the microphone after I start streaming. So that's kind of unfortunate. So, hello, everybody. TisNessie here, or Nessie. Welcome to the Voices You Have Read. And I apologize for taking so long to get back to the series. Please, I apologize again for this here. I was going to do that earlier, but hence why I'm a minute or two late. So, to somewhat kind of ish make up for all this. I know not many people watch this series, but I thought I would try something that I've been wanting to try for a little bit before we start reading Midnight Sun. So I guess I'll get some of the nitty gritty out of the way first. First of all, I apologize for taking so long to get back to this series. Things were a little crazy with my schedule, hence why I don't say every Monday and Tuesday or something like that, right? So that'd be kind of cool. Midnight Sun Monday, Twilight Tuesday, or Twilight Thursday, whatever. That would be cool, but I don't know if I'm gonna end up doing that. So just for our visual people out here, I like to do something kind of new every episode. I don't know if that's enough, but it's gonna have to be. Okay, so to somewhat make up for this, because every episode I usually have a Twilight shirt on, but I literally only have two that actually still fit me because I'm a big girl. But I always also have a new mug. This one says, "You're so romantic." Thought that kind of be slightly appropriate. And also, I have this tea infuser that my brother gave me for Christmas that I haven't had a chance to try out yet. Because I wanted to try it out here, and since we are coming back, I thought, why not? So this is a Nessie tea infuser, which he got from Amazon for me for Christmas. Okay, so that's why. Okay, so I took it apart. I was gonna unbox it and everything for you guys, but then I was like, oh, you know what? Like I gotta put stuff into it, so I'm gonna prepare all that over my piano. How appropriate for Edward. Yes, my book is over there. Okay, so today's tea, I usually have the same tea just because it's easier to prepare, but today I am going for some cotton candy tea. This is pre-pandemic. I think it's I think this tea is a couple years old. I usually only use it for sweetening my tea or something. I haven't had this one in a really long time, but it's one of my favorites, and I think it's either A, been discontinued, or B, has been discontinued. I don't know which one. Interesting. So usually this David's tea is all, oh yeah, you want to put 2 of these perfect scoops in there. However, comma, yeah, 1 to 2. Okay, it only fits like 1.5. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, I brought another one. Anyways, I don't know if it's been discontinued or it will be, but I stocked up while I could. So please feel free to chat in the what's it called? the chat bar. And speaking of nitty gritty, I totally forgot I was going to say this. I am planning for the future of this series. I am going to be putting episodes of the series for they're going to be, my brain is elsewhere. They're going to be unlisted because I don't want to get in trouble with Stephenie Meyer or her team or whoever for reading the content, keeping people from getting the book. So I put the episode as unlisted. but it's still you're still able to view it in the if you have the link or if you look at the playlist. So I have that on my channel, and of course, this will be a part of it. So far, I have only made the first chapter of Twilight as unlisted, just because I wanted to get people caught up on what happened in the world of the emo king. All hail the emo king, Edward Cullen. So I don't know if I'm gonna keep doing it like that, where last chapter or like the whatever chapter of the other book goes unlisted, the older chapter, I guess. And yeah, so if you cannot find the playlist for whatever reason, go onto the channel. Oh God, I'm so sorry. My brain. The what's it called? The Facebook group. It's going to be listed down below. So you go onto there, join up, and then the link will be in there. So all right. So this still smells like coffee. It's just plain water though. Okay, so let's see. All right. Oh, that was a little bit less ceremonious than it was going to be. So so hopefully you guys are okay with this. There are the leaves of the tea are kind of just floating there. So okay, I'm gonna let that steep while we get to the next chapter of Edward Cullen, the Great Emo King. I don't know why. I like calling him the Emo King. I'm pretty sure the fandom does too. Okay, so let's get on to chapter 2. I'm wondering if I should. You know what? I'm probably gonna take off the. This is a lot harder than it should be because I'm trying not to damage it either. Okay. I don't remember if I did that as well last time. Probably not. So that's kind of nice. It matches the other ones. So that's really cool. All right. Let me find it. Unlike Twilight, I don't have a bookmark for this one that I made 10 years ago. Nope, that's chapter 3. So if you do not remember what happened last time, it's okay. I don't really remember too much because I mean it has been a little bit. But again, this is my first time reading it, so that's going to be an experience for us. And last time, what had happened was Edward had seen Bella across the room, and he thought there was something wrong with him because he couldn't hear her. Couldn't hear her thoughts. So he was like, "Oh, that's interesting. That's kind of upsetting. What am I? Well, who am I if I don't have this gift, right?" So, and he spent like 10 pages. I'm exaggerating, obviously, but 10 pages um, of the science lab room, and Edward had decided that he is going to leave because he doesn't want to endanger his family. And he's like, like what, who is this girl? Like why is she, uh, you know, making me uproot my life? I don't know. And he had said like, if he had known that there was somebody who had as strong of a scent as Bella, then he would have looked for it a long time ago. And it's been 80 years. So I keep forgetting that this takes place in 2005 and not like 2008, 9, 10, which is when the movies came out and like when I really got into this. So that's interesting. So it's so cute. I'm sorry. It's so adorable. A little messy. So let's get to this book. 10 minutes in. I apologize. Hopefully these intros won't take as long later. All right. So here we go. Chapter 2. Open book. I leaned back against the soft snowbank, letting the dry powder reshape itself around my weight. My skin had cooled to match the air around me, and tiny pieces of ice felt like velvet under my skin. The sky above me was clear, brilliant with stars, glowing blue in some places, yellow in others.
The stars created majestic swirling shapes against the black backdrop of the empty universe. An awesome sight. The word awesome is kind of weird. This is obviously going to be a bit more conversational for Midnight Sun versus Twilight. Just a reminder. An awesome sight. Awesome. Exquisitely beautiful. Or rather, it should have been exquisite. Would have been, if I'd been able to really see it. It wasn't getting any better. 6 days had passed. 6 days I'd hidden in the empty Denali wilderness. But I was no closer to freedom than I had been since the moment I'd caught her scent. When I stared at the jeweled sky, it was as if there was an obstruction between my eyes and its beauty. The obstruction was a face, but an unremarkable human face. But I couldn't quite seem to banish it from my mind. I heard the approaching thoughts before I heard the footsteps that accompanied them. The sound of movement was only a faint whisper against the powder. I was not surprised that Tanya had followed me here. I knew she'd been mulling over this coming conversation for the last few days, putting it off until she was sure of exactly what she'd wanted to say. She sprang into sight about 60 yards away, leaping onto the tip of an outcropping of black rock and balancing there on the balls of her bare feet. Tanya's skin was silver in the starlight, and her long blonde curls shone pale, almost pink in their strawberry tint. Her amber eyes glistened as she spied me, half buried in the snow, and her full lips stretched slowly into a smile. Exquisite, if I'd have been able to hear I'd been able to see her. I sighed. She hadn't dressed for human eyes. She wore only a thin cotton camisole and a pair of shorts. Crouching down on a uh, promontory of stone, promontory, promontory. Interesting choices of words. Uh, as you can see, I'm very intelligent. Of stone. She touched the rock with her fingertips, and her body coiled. Sorry. And her body coiled. Cannonball, she thought. She launched herself into the air. Her shape became a dark, twisting shadow as she spun gracefully between the stars and me. She curled herself into a ball as she struck the piled snowbank beside me. A blizzard of snow flew up around me. The stars went black, and I was buried deep in the feathery ice crystals. I sighed again, breathing in the ice, but didn't move to unearth myself. The blackness under the snow neither hurt nor improved the view. I still saw the same face. Edward? Then snow was flying again as Tanya swiftly discerned me. She brushed the powder from my skin, not quite meeting my gaze. Sorry, she murmured. It was a joke. I know. It was funny. Her mouth twisted down. Irina and Kate said I should leave you alone. They think I'm annoying you. Not at all, I assured her. On the contrary, I'm the one who's being rude. Abominably rude. I'm very sorry. You're going home, aren't you? She thought. I haven't entirely decided that yet. But you're not staying here. Her thought was wistful now. No, it doesn't seem to be helping. Her lips pushed into a pout. That's my fault, isn't it? Of course not. She hadn't made anything easier, for certain, but the face that haunted me was only true impediment. Don't be a gentleman. I smiled. I make you uncomfortable, she accused. No. She raised one eyebrow, her expression so disbelieving that I had to laugh. One short laugh, followed by another sigh. All right, I admitted. A little bit. She sighed too and put her chin on her hands. You're 1,000 times wait, that was Tanya. You're 1,000 times lovelier than the stars, Tanya. Of course. You're already well aware of that. Don't let my stubbornness undermine your confidence. I chuckled at the unlikeliness of that. I'm not used to rejection, she grumbled, her lower lip pushing into an attractive pout. Certainly not, I agreed. trying with little success to block out her thoughts as she fleetingly sifted through memories of her thousands of successful conquests. Mostly, Tanya preferred human men. They were much more populous, for one thing, with the added advantage of being soft and warm, and always eager. Definitely. Succubus, I teased, hoping to interrupt the images flickering in her head. She grinned and flashing her teeth. The original. Unlike Carlyle, Tanya and her sisters had discovered their consciousness slowly. In the end, it was their fondness for human men that turned them against slaughter. Now the men they loved lived. When you showed up here, Tanya said slowly, I thought that I'd known what she thought, but I should have guessed that she would feel that way. But I'd not been at my best for analytical thinking in that moment. You thought I'd changed my mind. Yes, she scowled. I felt horrible for toying with. I feel horrible for toying with your emotions, Tanya. I didn't mean to. I was thinking. It was just that I left in quite a hurry. I don't suppose you'd tell me why? I sat up and folded my arms across my chest, my shoulders rigid. I prefer not to talk about it. Please forgive my reserve. She was quiet again, still speculating. I ignored her, trying in vain to appreciate the stars. She gave up after a silent moment, and her thoughts pursued a new direction. Where will you go, Edward? If you leave? Back to Carlisle? I don't think so, I whispered. Where would I go? I could not think of one place in the entire planet that held any interest for me. There was nothing I wanted to see or do, because no matter where I went, I would not be going to anywhere. I would not be going to anywhere. I would only be running from. I hated that. When had I become such a coward? When have I become such a coward? Sorry. uh, Tanya threw her slender arm around my shoulders. I stiffened, but did not flinch from her touch. She meant it as nothing more than friendly comfort, mostly. I think that you will go back, she said, her voice taking on just a hint of her long-lost Russian accent. No matter what it is, or who it is, that haunts you, you'll face it head-on. You're the type.
I'm experimenting with Tanya's voice, so I apologize if you don't like it or if you think it sounds too close to Esme or Rosalie. But I'm doing my best with the Russian accent. That helps me a little bit.
Her thoughts were as certain as her words. I tried to embrace the vision of myself that she saw, the one who faced things head on. It was pleasant to think of myself that way again. I never doubted my courage, my ability to face difficulty before that horrible hour in a high school biology class such a short time ago. I kissed her cheek, pulling back swiftly as she twisted her face toward mine. She smiled ruefully at my quickness. Thank you, Tanya. I needed to hear that. Her thoughts turned petulant. You're welcome, I guess. I wish you would be more reasonable about things, Edward. I'm sorry, Tanya. I know you're far too good for me. I just haven't found what I'm looking for yet. Well, if you leave before I see you again. Goodbye, Edward. Goodbye, Tanya. As I said the words, I could see it. I could see myself leaving, being strong enough to go back to the one place I wanted to be. Again, thank you. She was on her feet in one nimble move, and then she was running away, ghosting, across the snow so quickly that her feet had no time to sink in. She left no prints behind her. She did not look back. My rejection bothered her more than she'd let on before, even in her thoughts. She wouldn't want to see me again before I left. My mouth twisted downward. I didn't like hurting Tanya. Though her feelings were not deep, hardly pure, and in any case not something I could return, it still made me feel less than a gentleman. I put my chin on my knees and stared up at the stars again, though I was suddenly anxious to be on my way. I knew Alice would see me coming home, that she would tell the others. This would make them happy, Carlyle and Esme especially. But I gazed at the stars for one more moment, trying to see past the face in my head. Between me and the brilliant lights in the sky, a pair of bewildered chocolate brown eyes wandered wondered at my motives, seeming to ask what this decision would mean for her. Of course, I couldn't be sure that that was really the information her curious eyes sought. Even in my imagination, I couldn't hear her thoughts. Bella Swan's eyes continued to question, and an obstructed view of the stars continued. I apologize for any headphone users for that. Let me take a look at my tea for a second. Okay. It's been about 10 minutes or so. Ooh, it smells good. Looks like the leaves are not as loose as they were before. I think I'm gonna take it out. I'm going to finish this paragraph and then I will take a look. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Yuzi. Thank you. And thank you for joining us. Let me find where I was. Okay. I'm yeah. I'll finish this paragraph and there's like a little slight paragraph there, so I will take a look at that afterwards. Um, let's go back a little bit. Bella Swan's eyes continued to question, and an unbothered, obstructed view of the stars continued to elude me. With a heavy sigh, I gave up and got on my feet. If I ran, I would be back to Carlyle's car in less than an hour. In a hurry to see my family, and wanting to very much to be the Edward who faced things head on, I raced to get across the starlit snowfield, leaving no footprints. All right, so I'm just going to take a quick break while I get this tea all under control because I do need a drink every so often because voice acting is exhausting, but it's still a lot of fun. I know I had to say something to you guys about something. Oh, yes. So, let me see. I am going to be part of a Toronto cabaret. I will put the links in the group as well. I may record something for the it's first. I may record it. I'm not sure, but I will be singing a song that will be in will possibly be in the Scott Pilgrim musical that I am currently writing for. So it is a song that I played in the Scott Pilgrim live stream. And I am hoping that you guys will enjoy it and love it. And it's because I think it's probably my favorite song in the whole show. Actually, did I decide? I guess I decided now what song I was going to do. So yeah, check that out. And yeah, it's gonna be a good time. And also check out Flowers, which is a audio drama that I have, or it's not an audio drama yet. I am currently holding auditions for the audio drama, but I have released the album. Thank you. And but I have released the album for the audio drama called and it's called Flowers. It's a prequel to the Scott Pilgrim series, and it's fan made. I have completely wrote it. And if you buy it's free here on YouTube, but if you buy the album on Bandcamp, it's for a minimum price of $1 Canadian, but you can choose to pay more. All the money is going to be going toward funding the actual audio drama, which I am currently having auditions for. So I'm hoping to pay the actors, get some graphic artists and whatever not, hopefully for that. So before I talk and ramble too much, let's try this tea. Let's see how good of a TisNessie makes. The tea infuser, not me. Pretty good, actually. Yeah. A lot of loose leaf. I haven't never had. I have whipping cream because I'm keto, or I'm trying to go back to being keto. I've never had that in tea, but it's pretty nice. It's a bit milder than I would like for my tea. I like my tea strong because I like my tea to be strong and sweet. All right, cool. So that's good. Awesome. All right, let's go back to Midnight Sun. And thank you for listening to my little commercial break. All right, here we go. It's going to be okay, Alice breathed. Her eyes were unfocused, and Jasper had one hand lightly under her elbow, guiding her forward as we walked into the rundown cafeteria in a close, huddled group. Rosalie and Emmett led the way, Emmett looking ridiculously like a bodyguard in the middle of a hostile territory. Rose looked wary too, but much more irritated than protective.
It's interesting because I thought that we would maybe have a little bit more time with the Denali coven than what we were given. And then next thing you know, boom, he's back. I thought maybe we'd get a chapter or something of him in Alaska, and then maybe like the reunion or something. But it's fine. We can just get straight to the action. Why not? Let me find where I was. All right. Rosalie and Emmett led the way, but much more irritated than protective. Of course it is, I grumbled. Their behavior was ludicrous. If I weren't so positive that I could handle this moment, I would have stayed home. The sudden shift from our normal, even playful morning, it had snowed in that night, and Emmett and Jasper were not above taking advantage of my distraction to bombard me with slush balls. When they got bored with my lack of response, they turned on each other. To this overdone vigilance would have been a, would to this overdone vigilance would have been comical if it weren't so irritating. Um, I'm just trying to see who that is.
She's not here yet, but the way she's going to come in, she won't be down. She won't be downwind if we sit in our regular spot.
Of course, we'll sit in our regular spot. Stop it, Alice. You're getting on my nerves. I'll be absolutely fine. She blinked once as Jasper helped her onto her seat, and her eyes finally focused on my face. She said, sounding surprised.
I think you're right.
Of course I am, I muttered. I hated being the focus of their concern. I felt a sudden sympathy for Jasper, remembering all the times we hovered protectively over him. He met my glance briefly and grinned. Annoying, isn't it? I glowered at him. Was it just last week that this long, drab room had seemed so killingly dull to me? That it had seemed almost like sleep, like a coma, to be here. Today my nerves were stretched tight, piano wires, tense to sing at the lightest pressure. My senses were hyper alert. I scanned every sound, every sight, every movement of the air that touched my skin, every thought, especially the thoughts. There was only one sense that I kept locked down, refused to use. Smell, of course. I didn't breathe. I was expecting to hear more about the Cullens and the thoughts that I sifted through. All day I'd been waiting, searching for whatever new acquaintance Bella Swan might have confided in, trying to see the direction of the new gossip would take, but there was nothing. No one particularly noticed the 5 vampires in the cafeteria, just as before the girl had come. Several of the humans here were still thinking of her, still thinking the same thoughts from last week. Instead of finding this utterly boring, I was now fascinated. Had she said nothing to anyone about me? There was no way that she had not noticed my black, murderous glare. I had seen her react to it. Surely I'd traumatized her. I was convinced that she would have mentioned it to someone, maybe have exaggerated a little bit to make it better, given me a few menacing lines. And then she'd also heard me get out of our shared biology class. Maybe she must have wondered, after seeing my expression, whether she was the cause. A normal girl would have asked around, compared her experience to others, looked for common ground that would explain my behavior so she didn't feel singled out. Humans were constantly desperate to feel normal, to fit in, to blend in with everyone around them, like a featureless flock of sheep. The need was particularly strong during the insecure adolescent years. This girl would be no exception to that rule. But no one at all took notice of us sitting here at our usual table. I apologize for that clicking noise. That is the pipes. I don't know if that has been in previous episodes or not, but I apologize for that clicking. Trust me, if I could control it, I would stop it. But no one at all took notice of us sitting here at our usual table. Bella must be exceptionally shy if she can't confide in anyone. Perhaps she had spoken to her father. Maybe that was the strongest relationship, though that seemed unlikely given that she had spent so little time with him throughout her life. She would be closer to her mother. Still, I would have to pass by Chief Swan sometime and listen to what he was thinking. Anything new? Jasper asked. I concentrated, allowing all the swarms of thoughts to invade my mind again. There wasn't anything that stood out. No one was thinking of us. Despite my earlier worries, it didn't seem that there was anything wrong with my abilities, aside from the silent girl. I'd shared my concerns with Carlyle upon my return, but he'd only ever heard of talents growing stronger with practice. Never did they atrophy. Jasper waited impatiently. Nothing. She must not have said anything. All of them raised their eyebrows at this news. Maybe you're not as scary as you think you are, Emmett said, chuckling. I bet that I could have frightened her better than that. I rolled my eyes at him. Wonder why? He puzzled. Wait. Wonder why? He puzzled again over my revelation about the girl's unique silence. We've been over that. I don't know.
She's coming in,
Alice murmured then. My body froze.
Try to look human.
Human, you say? Jasper asked. He held up his right fist, twisting his fingers to reveal a snowball that he'd saved in his palm. It had not melted there. He squeezed it into a lumpy block of ice. That's great. I love that. He had his eyes on Jasper, but I saw the direction of his thoughts. So did Alice, of course. When he abruptly hurled the ice chunk at her, she flicked it away with a casual flutter of her fingers. The ice ricocheted across the length of the cafeteria, too fast to be visible for human eyes, and shattered with a sharp crack against the brick wall. The brick cracked too. The heads of that corner of the room all turned to stare at the pile of broken ice on the floor, and then swiveled to find the culprit. They didn't look further than a few tables away. No one looked at us.
Very human, Emmett,
Rosalie said scathingly.
Why don't you punch through a wall while you're at it?
I did. It would look more impressive if you did it, gorgeous. I tried to pay attention to them, keeping a grin fixed on my face, as though I were part of their banter. I did not allow myself to look toward the line where I knew she was standing, but that was all I was listening to. I could hear Jessica's impatience with the new girl, who seemed to be distracted too, standing motionless in the moving line. I saw, in Jessica's thoughts, that Bella Swan's cheeks were once more colored bright pink with blood. I pulled in a few short, shallow breaths, ready to quit breathing if any hint of her scent touched the air near me. Mike Newton was with two girls. I heard both his voices, mental and verbal, when he asked Jessica what was wrong with the Swan girl. It was distasteful to ask the way his thoughts were wrapped around her, the flicker of already established fantasies that clouded his mind while he watched her start and looked up from her reverie as though she'd forgotten he was there. Nothing, I heard Bella say in that quiet, clear voice. It seemed to ring like a struck bell over the babble in the cafeteria, but I knew that was just because I was listening to it so intensely. I'll just get a soda today, she continued as she moved to catch up with the line. I couldn't help flickering one glance in her direction. She was staring at the floor, the blood slowly fading from her face. I looked away quickly to Emmett, who laughed at the now pained-looking smile on my face. You look sick, brother of mine. I rearranged my features so the expression would seem casual and effortless. Jessica was wondering about aloud about the girl's lack of appetite. Aren't you hungry? Actually, I feel a little sick. Her voice was lower, but still very clear. Why did it bother me? The protective concern that suddenly emanated. I apologize. It's one of those words that I've never seen it spelled. Why did it bother me? A protective concern that suddenly emanated from Mike Newton's thoughts. What did it matter that they were so possessive? What did it matter that there was a possessive edge to them? It wasn't my business if Mike Newton felt unnecessarily anxious for her. Perhaps this was the way everyone responded to her. Had I wanted instinctively to protect her too? Before I'd wanted to kill her, that is? But was the girl ill? It was hard to judge. She looked so delicate with her translucent skin. Then I realized that I was worrying, that just like that dim-witted boy, and I forced myself not to think about her health. Regardless, I didn't like monitoring her health. Uh, I didn't like monitoring her through Mike's thoughts. I switched to Jessica's, watching carefully as the three of them chose which table to sit at. Fortunately, they sat with Jessica's usual companions at one of the first tables in the room, not downwind, just as Alice had promised. Alice elbowed me.
She's going to look soon. Act human.
I clenched my teeth behind my grin. Ease up, Edward, Emmett said. Honestly, so you kill one human. That's hardly the end of the world. You would know, I murmured. Emmett laughed. You gotta learn to get over things, like I do. Eternity is a long time to wallow in guilt. Just then, Alice tossed a smaller handful of ice that she'd been hiding into Emmett's unsuspecting face. He blinked, surprised, and then grinned in anticipation. You asked for it, he said, and leaned across the table and shook his ice encrusted hair in that direction. The snow melting in the warm room flew out of his hair and in a thick shower of half liquid, half ice. Ew! Rose complained as she and Alice recoiled from the deluge. Alice laughed, and we all joined in. I could see in Alice's head how she'd orchestrated this perfect moment, and I knew that the girl. I should stop thinking of her that way, as if she were the only girl in the world. That Bella would be watching us laugh and play, looking as happy and human and unrealistically ideal as the Norman Rockwell painting. Alice kept laughing and held her tray up as a shield. The girl, Bella, must be staring at us. Staring at the Cullens. Wait, staring at the Cullens again, someone thought, catching my attention. I looked automatically toward the unintentional call, easily recognizing the voice as my eyes found their destination. I've been listening to it so much today. But my eyes slid right past Jessica and focused on the girl's pertaining gaze. She looked down quickly, hiding behind her thick hair again. What was she thinking? The frustration seemed to be getting more acute as time went on, rather than dulling. I tried, uncertain, for I'd never done this before, to probe with my mind at the silence around her. My extra hearing had always come to me naturally, without asking. I never had to work at it, but I concentrated now, trying to break through whatever armor surrounded her. Nothing but silence. What is it about her? Jessica thought, echoing my own irritation.
Edward Cullen is staring at you,
she whispered in the swan girl's ear, adding a giggle. There was no hint of her jealous annoyance in her tone. Jessica seemed to be skilled at feigning friendship. I listened, too engrossed to the girl's response. He doesn't look angry, does he? She whispered back. So she had noticed my wild reaction last week. Of course she had. The question confused Jessica. I saw my own face in her thoughts as she checked my expression. But I did not meet her glance. I was still concentrating on the girl, trying to hear something. Intent focus didn't seem to help at all. No, Jess told her. And I knew that she'd wish that she could say yes, but how it rankled her, my staring, though there was no trace of that in her voice. Should he be? I don't think he likes me, the girl whispered back, laying her head down on her arms as if she was suddenly tired. I tried to understand the motion, but I could only make guesses. Maybe she was tired.
The Cullens don't like anybody,
Jess assured her.
It's funny that Edward is calling her Jess, because I know Bella called her Jess in the book. Jess, Jessica, whatever not. Just like Jacob, Jake. It's very informal in that way, but it's interesting that Edward is calling her Jess as if they're friends when they're not. All right.
The Cullens don't like anybody,
Jess assured her.
Well, they don't notice anybody enough to like them.
They never used to.
They never used to.
Her thoughts were a grumble of complaint.
But he's still staring at you.
Stop looking at him, the girl said anxiously, lifting her head from her arm to make sure Jessica obeyed her order. Jessica giggled. but did as she asked. The girl did not look away from the table as the rest of for the rest of the hour. I thought, though of course I could not be sure, that this was deliberate. It seemed as though she wanted to look at me. Her body would shift slightly in my direction. Her chin would begin to turn, and then she would catch herself, take a deep breath, and stare fixedly at whoever was speaking. I ignored the other thoughts around the girl for the most part, as they were not momentarily about her. Mike Newton was planning a snowball fight in the parking lot after school, not seeming to realize that the snow had already shifted to rain. The flutter of soft flakes against the roof had become a more common patter of raindrops. Could he really not hear the change? It seemed loud to me. When the lunch period ended, I stayed in my seat. The humans filed out, and I caught myself trying to distinguish the sound of her footsteps from the rest, as if there was something important or unusual about them. How stupid.
There's something quite lovely about that little bit of him just trying to distinguish her footsteps. I think that's really sweet, even though he's not in love with her yet, or maybe he is. I just think that's really lovely about him, just his little attention to detail.
My family made no move to leave either. They wanted to see what I would do. But I would go to class, sit beside the girl, where I could smell the absurdly potent scent of her blood and feel the warmth of her pulse in the air of my skin. Was I strong enough for this? Or had I had enough for one day? As a family, we'd already discussed this moment in every possible angle. Carlyle disapproved of the risk, but he wouldn't impose his will on mine. Jasper disapproved nearly as much, but from fear of exposure rather than any concern for humankind. Rosalie only worried about how it would affect her life. Alice saw so many obscure, conflicting futures that her visions were atypically unhelpful. Esme thought I could do no wrong, and Emmett just wanted to compare stories about his own experiences with particularly appealing sense. He pulled Jasper in his reminiscing, though Jasper's history with self-control was short and so uneven that he was unable to be sure that he'd never had an analogous struggle. Emmett, on the other hand, remembered two such incidents. His memories of them were not encouraging, but he'd been younger then, not as adept at self-control. Surely I was stronger than that.
I think it's okay,
Alice said, hesitant.
Your mind is set. I think you'll be able to make it through the hour.
But Alice knew how quickly a mind could change. Why push it, Edward? Jasper asked. Though he didn't feel smug that I was the weak one now. I could hear that he did, just a little. Go home, take it slow. What's the big deal? Emmett disagreed. Either he will or he won't kill her. Might as well get it over with either way.
I don't want to move yet, Rosalie complained. I don't want to start over. We're almost already out of high school, Emmett. Finally.
I was evenly torn by the decision. I wanted badly to face this head on rather than running away again. But I didn't want to push myself too far either. It had been a mistake last week for Jasper to go so long without hunting. Was this just as pointless a mistake? I didn't want to uproot my family. None of them would thank me for that. But I wanted to go to my biology class. I realized I wanted to see her face again. That's what decided it for me. That curiosity. I was angry with myself for feeling it. Had I not promised myself that I wouldn't let the silence of this girl's mind make me unduly interested in her? And yet, here I was, most unduly interested. I wanted to know what she was thinking. Her mind was closed, but her eyes were very open. Perhaps I could read them instead.
No, Rose. I think it will really be okay,
Alice said.
It's firming up. I'm 93% sure that nothing bad will happen if he goes to class.
She looked at me, inquisitive, wondering what had changed in my thoughts that made her vision of the future more secure. Would curiosity be enough to keep Bella Swan alive? Emmett was right, though. Why not get it over with either way? I would face the temptation head on. Go to class, I ordered, pushing away from my table. I turned and strode away from them without looking back. I could hear Alice's worry, Jasper's censure, Emmett's approval, and Rosalie's irritation trailing after me. I took one last deep breath at the door of the classroom, and then held it in my lungs as I walked into the small, warm space. I was not late. Mr. Banner was still setting up for today's lab. The girl sat at our table, her face down again, staring at the folder that she was doodling on. I examined the sketch as I approached, interested in even this trivial creation of her mind, but it was meaningless, just a random scribble of loops within loops. Perhaps she was not concentrating on the pattern, but thinking of something else? I pulled my chair back with unnecessary roughness, letting it escape across across the linoleum. Humans always felt more comfortable when noise announced someone's approach. I knew she heard the sound. She did not look up, but her hand missed the loop on the design she was drawing, making it unbalanced. Why did she look up? Probably she was frightened. I must be sure to leave her with a different impression this time. Make her think she'd been imagining those things before. Hello? I said in a quiet voice I used when I wanted to make humans more comfortable, forming a polite smile with my lips that would not show any teeth. She looked up then, her brown eyes startled and full of silent questions. It was the same expression that had been obstructing my vision for the past week. As I stared into those oddly deep brown eyes, the color was like milk chocolate, but the clarity was more comparable to strong tea. Ah! There was a depth and transparency near her pupils. There were tiny flecks of agate green in gold caramel. I realized that the hate I'd imagined this girl somehow deserved for simply existing, had evaporated. Not breathing now, not tasting her scent, I found it hard to believe that anyone so vulnerable could ever be deserving of hatred. Her cheeks began to flush, and she said nothing. I wonder if there was anyone ever who actually hated Bella. Like, I mean, Jessica's jealous, but that's a different kind of hate. Maybe Lauren, who knows? But I just think that's really interesting. But I'm just wondering, is there anyone who hates Bella? I mean, Jacob kind of does later, but I think hate's a bit of a strong word. Jacob has his reasons. All right, back to Midnight Sun. I kept my eyes on her, focused only on the questioning depths, and tried to ignore the appetizing color of her skin. I had enough to breathe. I had enough breath to speak for a while longer without inhaling. My name is Edward Cullen, I said, as though she already knew it. It was the polite way to begin. I didn't have a chance to introduce myself last week. You must be Bella Swan. She seemed confused. There was a little pucker between her eyes again. It took her half a second longer than it should have to respond. How do you know my name? She demanded, and her voice shook a little. I must have truly terrified her, and this made me feel guilty. I laughed gently. It was a sound that I knew humans made that I knew made humans more at ease. Oh, I think everyone knows your name. Surely she must have realized that she'd become the center of attention in this monotonous place. The whole town's been waiting for you to arrive. She frowned, as if this information was unpleasant. I supposed, being shy as she appeared to be, attention would seem like a bad thing to her. Most humans felt the opposite, though they didn't want to stand out from the herd. At the same time, they craved a spotlight for their individual informity. No, she said. I meant, why did you call me Bella? Do you prefer Isabella? I asked, perplexed that I couldn't see where this question was leading. I didn't understand. She'd made her preference clear many times that first day. Were all humans this incomprehensible without the mental context as a guide? How much I must rely on that extra sense? Would I be completely blind without it? Probably, Edward, probably. No, I like Bella, she answered, leaning her head slightly to one side. Her expression, if I was reading it correctly, was torn between embarrassment and confusion. But I think my dad, must call me Isabella behind my back. That's why everyone here seems to know me as. Her skin darkened one shade pinker. "Oh," I said, as I quickly looked away from her face. I just realized what her question meant. I had slipped up, made an error. If I hadn't been eavesdropping on all the others on that first day, then I would have addressed her initially by her full name. She noticed the difference. It's interesting because in the film, I'm pretty sure everyone just calls her Bella because she introduces herself as Bella. Well, except for Mike Noon, he's like, "Yeah, like I mean, like you're Isabella, right?" But it's not like a huge thing when Edward actually says like, "You're Bella." She's kind of like, yes," and that's kind of it. So, but I think that it's an important thing that is mentioned in the books. The fact that Charlie does call her Isabella, possibly when she's not around, because I mean, how long has it been since she was in Forks? And so everyone's like keeps saying Isabella, 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 and I know what that's like. For like, well, my real name, anyways. I prefer my short version, which is why I always sign things with the short version of my name, or with Nessie, because I prefer those names over my full name. So I know what that's like for Bella, and I think it's an interesting trait for somebody to have in a book, that is not explored in the films. So let's keep going. I just wanted to bring up that little tidbit that it's interesting that Edward noticed that he made an error in calling her by her preferred name. So I think that's really. I mean, we all knew that he knew only because he was reading everyone's minds. So I mean, Mr. Banner didn't have her introduce herself in front of the class, so it's not like she's like, "Hi everyone, I'm Bella Swan." It's not like he would have known that way. And then the fact that the Cullens are isolated, it's another thing. So I think that's really interesting. Just something as simple as Bella's name, I am going on a full on lecture about. All right, let's get back to the book. Do, 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 do. If I hadn't been eavesdropping on all the others that first day, then I would have addressed her initially by her full name. She'd noticed the difference. I felt a pang of unease. It was very quick. Of her to pick up on my slip. Quite astute, especially for someone who was supposed to be terrified by my proximity. But I had bigger problems than whatever suspicions about me she might be keeping locked inside her head. I was out of air. If I was going to speak to her again, I would have to inhale. It would be hard to avoid speaking. It would be hard to avoid speaking. Unfortunately for her, sharing this table made her my lab partner. I apologize. Excuse me. Sharing this table made her my lab partner, and we would have to work together today. It would seem odd and incomprehensibly rude for me to ignore her while we did this lab. It would make her more suspicious, more afraid. I leaned as far away from her as I could, without moving my seat, twisting my head out of the aisle. I braced myself, locking my muscles in place, and then stuck in one quick chestful of air, breathing through my mouth alone. Ah, it was intensely painful, like swallowing burning coals. Even without smelling her, I could still taste her on my tongue. The craving was every bit as strong as that first moment I'd caught her scent last week. I gritted my teeth and I tried to compose myself. "Get started," Mr. Banner commanded. It took every single ounce of self control I'd achieved in 74 years of hard work to turn back to this girl, who was staring down at the table, and smile. "Ladies first, partner?" I offered. She looked up at my expression, and her face went blank. Was there something off? In her eyes, I saw the reflection of my usual human friendly composition of features. The facade looked perfect. Was she frightened again? She didn't speak. "Or I could start if you wish," I said quietly. "No," she said, and her face went from white to red again. I'll go ahead." I stared at the equipment on the table, the battered microscope, the box of slides, rather than watch the blood wax and wane under her clear skin. I took another quick breath through my teeth and winced at the taste scorched inside my throat. Proface, she said as a quick examination. She started to remove the slide, though she'd barely examined it. Do you mind if I look? Instinctively, stupidly, as if I were one of a kind. I reached out to stop her hand from removing the slide. For 1 second, the heat of her skin burned into mine. It was like an electric pulse. The heat shot through my fingers and up my arm. She yanked her hand from under mine.
Ah, so he felt the shock too. That's interesting. But for him, it's like I guess he's explaining it with heat. So it could be static. Can vampires feel static? Maybe next episode we'll talk about that. Or you guys can discuss in the comments somewhere. She yanked her hand out from under mine. I'm sorry, I muttered. Needing somewhere to look, I grasped the microscope and stared briefly into the eyepiece. She was right. Proface. I agreed. I was still too unsettled to look at her, breathing as quietly as I could through my gritted teeth and trying to ignore the fiery thirst. I concentrated at the simple assignment, writing the word on the appropriate line on the lab sheet, and then switching out the first slide for the next. What was she thinking now? What had it felt like for her when I had touched her hand? My skin must have been ice cold, repulsive. No wonder she was so quiet. I glanced at the slide. Anaphase, I said to myself, and I wrote it on the second line. May I? She asked. I looked up, surprised to see that she was waiting expectantly, one hand half stretched toward the microscope. She didn't look afraid. Did she really think that I'd gotten the answer wrong? I couldn't help but smile at the hopeful expression on her face as I slid the microscope toward her. She stared into the eyepiece with eagerness that quickly faded. The corners of her mouth turned down. Slide 3? She asked, not looking up from the microscope, but holding out her hand. I dropped the next slide into her palm, keeping my skin far from hers this time. Sitting beside her was like sitting next to a heat lamp. I could feel myself warming slightly to the higher temperature. She did not look at the slide for long. Interface, she said nonchalantly, perhaps trying a little too hard to sound that way, and pushing the microscope toward me. She did not touch the paper, but waited for me to write down the answer. I checked. She was correct again. We finished this way, speaking one word at a time and never meeting each other's eyes. We were the only ones done. The others in the class were having a harder time with the lab. Mike Newton seemed to be having trouble concentrating. He was trying to watch Bella and me. I wish he'd stayed wherever he went, Mike thought, eyeing me seriously. Interesting. I hadn't realized the boy harbored any specific ill will toward me. This was a new development. About as recent as the girl's arrival, it seems. Even more interestingly, I found, to my surprise, that the feeling was mutual. I looked at the girl again, bemused at the vast range of havoc and upheaval that, despite her ordinary, unthreatening appearance, she was wreaking on my life. It wasn't that I couldn't see what Mike was going on about. She was actually sort of pretty for a human, in an unusual way. Better than being beautiful, her face was unexpected, not quite symmetrical. Her narrow chin out of balance with her wide cheekbones, extreme in the coloring, the contrast of her light skin and dark hair, and then her eyes, too big for her face, brimming over with silent secrets. Eyes that were suddenly boring into mine. I stared back at her, trying to guess even one of those secrets. Did you get contacts? She asked abruptly. What a strange question. No. I almost smiled at the idea of improving my eyesight. Oh, she mumbled. I thought there was something different about your eyes. I suddenly felt colder again, as I realized that I was not the only one attempting to ferret out secrets today. I shrugged, my shoulders stiff, and I glared straight ahead where the teacher was making his rounds. Of course, there was something different about my eyes since the last time that she'd stared into them. To prepare myself for today's ordeal, today's temptation, I spent the entire weekend hunting, satiating my thirst as much as possible, overdoing it, really. I'd glutted myself on the blood of animals. Not that it made much of a difference in the face of outrageous flavor floating in the air around her.
When I glared at her last, my eyes had been black with thirst. Now my body was swimming with blood. My eyes were a warm gold, light amber color. Another slip. If she'd seen. I apologize for that. I'm gonna turn that off so we don't have any more interruptions from that. I ignored the last one, but I'm going to turn that off. I apologize. Um, I had a train of thought that I wanted to discuss about this. Now I forget. um, he was going to trying to remember what I was going to talk about. Um, yeah. That's what I was thinking of. I was like, oh, I'm just imagining like what if he had say put some animal blood into like a water bottle, like obviously not opaque or maybe I don't know. No, that would be gross. I was about to say like, yeah, he could totally it could totally be like see through and he'd be like, yeah, it's Gatorade, right? But then I'm just imagining like what if some poor child is just like, hey, can I have a sip of that? Then they realize the cold hard truth about what Edward's drinking. But then again, maybe like blood will get in his teeth, right? Like it'll stain his teeth. Oh, can vampires' teeth stain? Probably not, because then probably like James and Laurent and Victoria have like really like blood stained teeth and the Volturi and everything. I should be on Tumblr, but I am not. This is terrible. Let me know your comments about like why didn't he just bring a water bottle of blood to like prepare himself? Like, hey Bella, how you doing? Just every time he like feels the urge, he just drinks some blood. It's probably gonna like taste disgusting in comparison to like what he's smelling. Like when you're drinking some cheap coffee or something and you're in like a Starbucks and you're like, it smells so much better, or something like that. I don't know. Let's get back to the book. I'd sat behind the humans. I'd sat beside humans for 2 years now at the school, and she was the first to examine me closely enough to note the change in my eye color. The others, while admiring the beauty of my family, tended to look down on me quickly whenever we returned their stares. They shied away, blocking the details of our appearances, in an instinctive endeavor to keep themselves from understanding. Ignorance was bliss to the human mind. Why did it have to be this girl who would see too much? Mr. Banner approached our table. I gratefully inhaled a gush of clean air as he brought with him before it could mix with a scent. So, Edward, he said, looking over our answers, didn't you think Isabella should get a chance with the microscope? I apologize if Mr. Banner's voice is different. Bella, I corrected him reflexively. Actually, she identified 3 of the 5. Mr. Banner's thoughts were skeptical as he turned to look at the girl. Have you done this lab before? I watched, engrossed, as she smiled and looked slightly embarrassed. Not with onion root. Whitefish bastula? Mr. Banner probed. Yeah. This surprised him. Today's lab was something he'd pulled from a senior class course. He nodded thoughtfully at the girl. Were you in an advanced placement program in Phoenix? Yes. She was advanced, then, intelligent for a human. This did not surprise me. Well, Mr. Banner said, pursing his lips. I guess it's good that you two are lab partners. He turned and walked away, mumbling, so the other kids can get a chance to learn something for themselves, under his breath. I doubted the girl would hear that. She began scrawling loops around her folder again. 2 slips so far in 1/2 hour. An extremely poor showing on my part. Though I had no idea at all what the girl thought of me. How much did she fear? How much did she suspect? I knew I needed to put forth a better effort to leave her with a new impression, something to quell her memories about her ferocious last encounter. It's too bad about the snow, isn't it? I said, repeating the small talk that I'd heard over a dozen students discuss already. A boring standard topic of conversation. The weather. Always safe. She stared at me with obvious doubt in her eyes, an abnormal reaction to my very normal words. Not really. I tried to steer the conversation back to tried paths. She was She was from a much brighter, warmer place. Her skin seemed to reflect that somehow, despite its fairness, and the cold must make her uncomfortable. My icy touch certainly had. You don't like the cold, I guessed. Or the wet, she agreed. Forks must be a very difficult place for you to live. Perhaps you should not have come here, I wanted to add. Perhaps you should go back to where you belong. I wasn't sure I wanted that, though. I would always remember the scent of her blood. Was there any guarantee that I wouldn't eventually follow her? Besides, if she left, her mind would forever remain a mystery, a constant nagging puzzle. You have no idea, she said in a low voice, glowering past me for a moment. Her answers were never what I expected. They made me want to ask more questions. Why did you come here then? I demanded, realizing instantly that my tone was too accusatory, not casual enough for the conversation. The question sounded rude, prying. It's complicated. She blinked, leaving it at that. I nearly imploded out of curiosity in that second. It burned almost as hot as the thirst in my throat. Actually, I found that it was getting slightly easier to breathe. The agony was becoming a tiny bit more bearable through familiarity. I think I can keep up, I insisted. Perhaps common courtesy could compel her to answer my questions as long as I was impolite enough to ask them. She stared down silently at her hands. This made me impatient. I wanted to put my hand under her chin, tilt her head up so that I could read her eyes, but of course I could never touch her skin again. She looked up suddenly. It was a relief to be able to see the emotions in her eyes. She spoke in a rush, hurrying through her words. My mother got remarried. Ah, this was human enough, easy to understand. Sorrow flitted across her face, bringing the small pucker back between her brows. That doesn't sound so complex, I said, my voice gentle without my working to make it that way. Her dejection left me oddly helpless, wishing that there was something I could do to make her feel better. A strange impulse. So when did that happen? Last September? She exhaled heavily, not quite a sigh. I froze for a moment as her warm breath brushed my face. And you don't like him? I guessed after a short pause, still fishing for more information. No, Phil's fine, she said, correcting my assumption. There was a hint of a smile now around the corner of her full lips. Too young, maybe, but nice enough. Just didn't fit with the scenario I'd been constructing in my head. Why didn't you stay with them? My voice was too eager. It sounded like I was being nosy, which I was, admittedly. Phil travels a lot. He plays ball for a living. The little smile grew more pronounced. This career choice amused her. I smiled too, without choosing the expression. I wasn't trying to make her feel at ease. Her smile just made me want to smile in response, to be in on the secret. Have I heard of him? I ran through the roster of professional ball players in my head, wondering which Phil was hers. Probably not. He doesn't play well. Another smile. Strictly minor league. He moves around a lot. The roster in my head shifted instantly. I tabulated a list of possibilities in less than a second. At the same time, I was imagining the new scenario. And your mother sent you here so that she could travel with him, I said, making assumptions seemed to get more information out of her than questions did. It worked again. Her chin jutted and her expression was suddenly stubborn. No, she did not send me here, she said. Her voice had a new hard edge to it. My assumption had upset her, though I couldn't quite see how. I sent myself. I could not have guessed her meaning, or the source behind her peak. I was entirely lost. There was just no making sense of the girl. She was like other humans. Maybe the silence of her thoughts and the perfume of her scent were not the only unusual things about her. I don't understand, I admitted, hating to concede. She sighed, staring into my eyes for longer than most normal humans were able to stand. She stayed with me at first, but she missed him, Bella explained slowly, her tone growing more forlorn with each word. It made her unhappy. Sorry, I'm just going to move my mouse away for a second from the end stream because I think my book is touching the thing. All right, where was I? She stayed with me at first, but she missed him, Bella explained slowly, her tone growing more forlorn with each word. It made her unhappy, so I decided it was time to spend some quality time with Charlie. The tiny pucker between her eyes deepened. But now you're unhappy, I murmured. I kept speaking my hypothesis aloud, hoping to learn from her refutations. Yes, refutations. Uh, this one, however, did not seem as far off the mark. And she said, as if that was not even as if um, as if this was not even an aspect to be considered. I continued to stare into her eyes, feeling that I'd finally gotten the first real glimpse into her soul. I saw in that one word where she ranked herself among her own priorities. Unlike most humans, her own needs were far down the list. She was selfless. As I saw this, the mystery of the person hiding inside the quiet mind began to clear a little. That doesn't seem fair, I said. I shrugged, trying to seem casual. She laughed, but there was no amusement in that sound.
Hasn't anyone ever told you? Life isn't fair.
I wanted to laugh at her words, though I, too, felt no real amusement. I knew a little something about unfairness of life. I believe I have heard of that somewhere. She stared back at me, seeming confused again. Her eyes flickered away, and then came back to mine. So that's all, she told me. I was not ready to let the conversation end. The little V between her eyes and a remnant of her sorrow bothered me. You put on a good show, I spoke slowly, still considering this next hypothesis, but I'd be willing to bet that you're suffering more than you let anyone else see. She made a face, her eyes narrowing and her mouth twisting into a lopsided frown, and she looked back toward the front of the class. She didn't like it that when I guessed right, she wasn't the average martyr. She didn't want an audience for her pain. Am I wrong? She flinched slightly, but otherwise pretended not to hear me. That made me smile.
I don't think so.
Wait, I didn't think so.
Why does it matter to you?
She demanded, still staring away. That's a very good question, I admitted, more to myself than to her. Her discernment was much better than mine. She saw right through the core. She saw right to the core of things, where I floundered around the edges, sifting blindly through clues. The details of her very human life should not matter to me. It was wrong of me to care what she thought. Beyond protecting my family from suspicion, human thoughts were not significant. I was not used to being the less intuitive of any pairing. I'd relied on my extra hearing too much. I clearly was not as perceptive as I gave myself credit for. The girl sighed and glowered toward the front of the classroom. Something about her her frustrated expression was humorous. I just want to take a look at how much longer. Okay, so we got like 1, 2, 3, 4, about 2.5. Or my math just went way out the window. we have a couple pages front and back left. Because I just realized that we're running a little bit longer than we usually do. So I don't know if that's because I'm talking a bit more or if that's just because this chapter is a little longer. So either way, I'm going to take a drink and keep going. All right. Okay. I just wanted to quickly look at my phone for a quick second to see if there was any kind of emergency or something. All right. Where was I? Okay. The girl sighed and glowered toward the front of the class. Something about her frustrated expression was humorous. The whole situation, the whole conversation was humorous. No one had ever been in more danger from me than this small human girl. At any moment I might, distracted by my ridiculous absorption of the conversation, inhale through my nose and attack her before I could stop myself. And she was irritated because I hadn't answered her question. Am I annoying you? I asked, smiling at the absurdity of it all. She glanced at me quickly, and then her eyes seemed to get trapped by my gaze. Not exactly, she told me. I'm more annoyed at myself. My face is so easy to read. My mother always calls me her open book. She frowned, disgruntled. I stared at her in amazement. She was upset because she thought I saw her too easily. How bizarre. I'd never expended so much effort into understanding someone in all my life, or rather existence, as life was hardly the right word. I did not truly have a life. On the contrary, I disagreed, feeling strangely wary. as if there was some hidden danger here that I was failing to see. Beyond the very obvious danger, something more. I was suddenly on edge. I the premonition was making me anxious. I find you very difficult to read.
You must be a good reader then.
She guessed, making her own assumption, which was, again, right on target. Usually, I agreed. I smiled at her widely then, letting my lips pull back to expose the rows of gleaming steel strong teeth behind them. It was a stupid thing to do, but I was abruptly, unexpectedly desperate to get some kind of warning through to the girl. Her body was closer to me than before, having shifted unconsciously in the course of our conversation. All the little markers and signs that were significant to scare off the rest of humanity did not seem to be working on her. Why did she not cringe away from me in terror? Surely she had seen enough of my darker side to realize the danger. I didn't get to see if my warning had the intended effect. Mr. Banner called for the class's attention just then, and she turned away from me at once. She seemed a little relieved by the interruption, so maybe she understood unconsciously. I hoped she did. I recognized the fascination growing inside me, even as I tried to root it out. I could not afford to find Bella Swan interesting, or rather, she could not afford that. Already I was anxious for another chance to talk to her. I wanted to know more about her mother, her life before she came here, her relationship with her father, all the meaningless details that would flesh out her character further. But every second I spent with her was a mistake, a risk that she shouldn't have to take. Absent-mindedly, she tossed her thick hair just at the moment that I was allowed to allow myself to take another breath. A particularly concentrated wave of her scent hit the back of my throat. It was like the first day, like a grenade. The pain of the burning dryness made me dizzy. I had to grasp the table again and keep myself in my seat. This time I had slightly more control. I didn't break anything, at least. The monster growled inside me, but took no pleasure in my pain. He was too tightly bound for the moment. I stopped breathing altogether and leaned as far from the girl as I could. No, I could not afford to find her fascinating. The more interesting I found her, the more likely it was that I would kill her. I'd already made 2 minor slips today. Would I make a third? Or would I make a third? One that was not minor? As soon as the bell sounded, I fled out of the classroom, probably destroying whatever impression of politeness I'd halfway constructed in the course of an hour. Again, I grasped the clean, wet air outside as though it was healing. It was a healing attar. I heard. I hurried to put as much distance as possible between myself and the girl. Emmett waited for me outside of the door of our Spanish class. He read my wild expression for a moment. How'd it go? He wondered wearily. Nobody died, I mumbled. I guess that's something. When I saw Alice ditching at the end, I thought. As we walked into the classroom, I saw his memory from just a few moments earlier, seen through the open door of his last class. Alice walking briskly and blank-faced across the grounds toward the science building. I felt his remembered urge to get up and join her, but then his decision to stay. If Alice needed his help, she would ask. I closed my eyes in horror and disgust as I slumped into my seat. I hadn't realized that it was that close. I didn't think I was going to. I didn't see that it was that bad, I whispered. It wasn't, he reassured me. Nobody died, right? Right, I said through my teeth. Not this time. Maybe it will get easier. Sure. Oh, yes, it does. Or maybe you'll kill her, he shrugged. You wouldn't be the first one to mess up. No one's going to judge you too harshly. Sometimes a person just smells too good. I'm impressed you lasted this long. Not helping him. I was revolted by his acceptance of the idea that I would kill the girl, that this was somehow inevitable. Was it her fault that she smelled so good? I know when it happened. I know what happened to me. I will say that again with less mumbling. I know when it happened to me, he reminisced, taking me back with him half a century to a country lane at dusk, where a middle-aged woman was pulling her dried sheets down from the line strung between apple trees. I'd seen this before, the strongest of his two encounters, but the memory seemed particularly vivid now, perhaps because my throat still ached from the last hour's scorching. Emmett remembered the smell of apples hanging heavy in the air. The harvest was over, and the rejecting fruits were scattered on the ground, the bruises on their skin leaking leaking their fragrance out in thick clouds. A freshly mowed field of hay was in the background to that scent, a harmony. He walked up the lane, all but oblivious to the woman on an errand for Rosalie. The sky was purple overhead, orange over the mountains in the west. He would have continued up the meandering cart path, and there would have been no reason to remember the evening, except that a sudden night breeze blew the white sheets out like sails and fanned the woman's scent across Emmett's face. Ah, I groaned quietly, as if my own remembered thirst was not enough. I know, I didn't last half a second. I didn't even think about resisting. His memory became far too explicit for me to stand. I jumped to my feet, my teeth locked hard.
Está bien, Edward?
Mrs. Goth asked, startled by my sudden movement. I could see my face in her mind. I knew that I looked far from well. Perdone. I apologize for my Spanish because I have little to like none. I'm usually pretty good at it, but usually at reading it, but that's when this word's not familiar. Perdona. I'm going to say that's what it is. I muttered as I darted for the door. Emmett, por favor, ¿puedes ayudar a tu hermano? She asked, gesturingly, helplessly toward me as I rushed out of the room. This is bringing me back to like when French teachers would speak to you in French. I'd be like, what? Sure, I heard him say, and then he was right behind me. He followed me into the far side of the building, where he caught up with me and put his hand on my shoulder. I shoved his hand away with unnecessary force. It would have shattered the bones in a human hand, but the bones in his arm attached to it. Sorry, Edward. I know. I drew in deep gasps of air, trying to clear my head in lunges. Is it that bad? Is it as bad as that? He asked, trying not to think of the scent and the flavor in his memory as he asked, and not quite succeeding. Worse, Emmett. Worse. He was quiet for a moment. Maybe. No. It would not be better if I got it over with. Go back to class, Emmett. I want to be alone. He turned without another word or thought and walked quickly away. He would tell the Spanish teacher that I was sick, or ditching, or a dangerously out of control vampire. Did his excuse really matter? Maybe I wasn't coming back. Maybe I had to leave. I returned to the car and to wait for school to end, to hide again. I should have spent this time making decisions or trying to bolster my resolve, but like an addict. I apologize. Yay, I waited an hour and 22 minutes before yawning. Yes, I know, Freddie. But like an addict, I found myself searching through the babble of thoughts emanating from the school building. The familiar voices stood out, but I wasn't interested in listening to Alice's visions or Rosalie's complaints right now. I found Jessica easily, but the girl was not with her, so I continued searching. Mike Newton's thoughts caught my attention, and I located her at last, in gym with him. He was unhappy because I'd spoken to her today in biology. He was running over her response when he brought up the subject. I'd never seen him actually say more than a word here or there to anyone. Of course he would decide to talk to Bella. I don't like the way he looks at her, but she doesn't seem too excited about him. What did she say to me earlier? What did she say to me earlier? Wonder what was with him last Monday? Something like that. Didn't sound like she cared. It wouldn't have mattered. It couldn't have been much of a conversation. He cheered himself up with the idea that Bella had not been interested in her exchange with me. This annoyed me a little bit, so I stopped listening to him. I put in a CD of violent music and I turned it up until it drowned the other voices. I had to concentrate on the music very hard to keep myself from drifting back to Mike Newton's thoughts to spy on the unsuspecting girl. I cheated a few times as the hour drew to a close. Not spying. I tried to convince myself. I was just preparing. I wanted to know exactly what she would when she would leave the gym, when she would be in the parking lot. I didn't want her to take me by surprise. As the students started to file out of the gym doors, I got out of my car. Not sure why I did it. The rain was light. I ignored it as I slowly saturated my hair. Did I want her to see me here? Did I hope that she would come speak to me? What was I doing? I didn't move, though I tried to convince myself to get back in the car, knowing my behavior was reprehensible. I kept my arms folded across my chest and breathed very shallowly as I watched her slowly toward me. As I watched her walk slowly toward me, her mouth turning down at the corners. She didn't look at me. A few times she glanced up at the clouds with a scowl as if they had offended her. I was disappointed. I was disappointed when she reached her car, but she had to pass me. Would she have spoken to me? Would I have spoken to her? She got into the faded red Chevy truck, a rusted behemoth that was older than her father. I watched her start the car. The old engine roared louder than any other vehicle in the lot, and then hold her hand, and then hold her hands out toward the heating vents. The cold was uncomfortable to her. She didn't like it. She combed her fingers through her thick hair, pulling locks through the steam of cold. I apologize. The steam of hot air, as though she was trying to dry them. I imagined what the cab of that truck would smell like, and I quickly drove out the thought. She glanced around as she prepared to back out, and finally looked in my direction. She was staring back at me for only half a second, and all I could read in her eyes was surprise before she tore them away and jerked the truck in reverse, and then squealed to a stop again. The back end of the truck missing a collision with Nicole Casey's compact by mere inches. She stared into her rearview mirror, her mouth hanging open, horrified at her near miss. When the other car had pulled past her, she checked all her blind spots twice and then inched out of the parking space so cautiously that it made me grin. It was as though she thought that she was dangerous in her decrepit truck. The thought of Bella Swan being dangerous to anyone, no matter what she was driving, had me laughing while the girl drove past me, staring straight ahead.
All right. And that's the end of chapter 2. The next chapter is called Risk. All right. So next time we will be reading Twilight, chapter 3. I know my pattern before was Twilight, Midnight Sun, but now that I missed a chapter for a couple weeks, it's interesting because now it's like Midnight Sun, Twilight, unless you want to look back on the last episode. Things were coming back to me a little bit, but they were a lot less. Oh, that's why that happened. I apologize for the pages. I just didn't want to put it down. Okay, so thank you so much for watching me do this thing, the voices you have read. Please make sure that you guys subscribe, hit the notification bell, and also join the Facebook group so that way you guys don't miss when I schedule an episode, because I try to schedule them 24 hours in advance. Sometimes I'm a little bit later than that just because I try to do them when my husband isn't home, and that very rarely happens when he's working and I'm not. But it does, and I gotta get him to write his schedule down, so this will be easier to figure out. So thank you so much for joining me. Yeah, and do all those fun things. And I believe that is all I have to say. Please, give this video a like. That way YouTube can get me more noticed and stuff. And please share this with your friends if you love Twilight. Tell me, what do you guys think? Do you think if Edward had brought a water bottle full of animal blood, do you think that would have helped? Do you think vampires' teeth stains a little bit even when they drink blood? And I forget what the other prompt I had was, but anything that you want to discuss, please let me know. I would love to talk about it with you guys. And thank you so much for joining me today. And I will talk to you guys soon. Keep calm and sparkle on. And thank you so much for joining me.